This is a webinar that I've wanted to do for a long time. Just some background for you. When How to SaaS first started, my thought was that it would actually be a education business where we would have a ton of courses and teach marketers how to be better at their jobs, help CEOs uh, do a better job with marketing. And then slowly the business evolved into becoming more of a consulting company because we had a ton of product market fit there with private equity investors and other software companies. And before you knew, we had a kind of a team. And so the course business never really took off because it was just never a priority. And so this topic has been near and dear to my heart for just a long time, and it's something that I'm really passionate about. It's why I post stuff on LinkedIn and talk about marketing as much as I do. And for what it's worth, like on LinkedIn, LinkedIn doesn't drive a ton of our business in terms of the types of people that we interact with there. Our business mainly works with private equity firms, and some of them follow the content, and LinkedIn almost becomes like a nurture stream for us because they see the content, but they've interacted with us in a different capacity, and it helps build thought leadership with them. But most of the people that interact with us on LinkedIn are actually marketers. And I've been a marketer. I came up in my career as a marketer, and when I was growing as a marketer, there were really not that many resources out there to become better at marketing. Now there's a lot more out there. And so I kind of had to self-study and figure this stuff out from scratch. And so I've always really wanted to organize this information in a way that helps marketers become better at their jobs, so that they can scale companies faster ultimately. Because as companies grow, you help everybody inside the company grow. You help customers do a better job in their respective roles, or businesses that those companies help grow as well. So there's a huge cascading effect that comes about from that. And my belief is that the world becomes a better place with companies growing. So that's kind of why I'm really, really passionate about this. So in terms of this topic, just some background. A lot of you obviously know me and follow my content, but my background, I was a CMO of a software company, sold it to private equity, then we sold it to a different private equity firm. All of this happened back in 2017 and 2018. And through that process of growing that previous business, I learned a ton about what it takes to grow software companies and B2B companies. And then as we got acquired, the PE firms started bringing me into their other investments to help those companies grow faster. And so I saw that as an opportunity and eventually founded this business that started in 2019. And since then, we've worked with hundreds of different businesses, tons of different private equity firms. And I've been myself the fractional CMO of a lot of big companies, most recently companies like Reich and Latera and Jumio and Chargebee and a bunch of other companies that you're probably familiar with and are household names. And we've also helped really large investors like TA, HG, and Updata and STG that invest in some of the biggest software companies in the world figure out how to scale their marketing efforts. And through all of that, I've learned a lot about what the patterns are in growing software companies and B2B businesses. And oftentimes the story is the same. It looks different in terms of specific numbers, but how to figure out the picture and where the business needs to focus is almost always the same. And I've noticed these patterns across businesses of different sizes, different industries, different verticals, maybe different revenue level, different type of investment model. The truths are the same across the board. And so really what I want to bring to you today, and this is just a starting point, we have been contemplating launching a course, like I said, for many years, and we're close to that. And this is almost like a preview, probably by Q4 of this year, How to SaaS will have its first ever course. So just keep that in mind as well. So going through this, I think my starting point is to say that regardless of where you are in your marketing career, and if you're already a CMO, you've probably gone through a journey like this, but regardless of where you are, there's a ceiling on your career as a marketer unless you can cross the chasm to becoming a CMO. And even at a CMO level, to go from CMO to CRO or CEO, there's a lot of things that you need to figure out before you can get to those levels. And there's many reasons for this, and we can jump around and I'm going to go through some of those things. But I think one of the first places to start is that tactics are overrated the further you get in your career, right? So it is super important to know what the latest SEO thing is, or the latest innovation or changes that happen with Google Analytics, or what Facebook has changed to their platform. But just over time, and the higher you move up in your career, it's going to turn out that tactics are just less relevant to what you're trying to accomplish. And on the flip side, strategic topics become way more important. And strategy just doesn't just imply knowing what the right thing to do is or where to deploy your budget, but it's really being able to think at a much higher level. Another way to kind of think about this, and this is one of my most popular drawings from like 4 years ago. I think it got like 1,000+ likes and a bunch of different shares, and it really resonated with the audience, and it made me realize that how many people have been sold this idea that becoming a T-shaped marketer is your path to success? I'm sure almost everybody in this room has, at some point, has sat in a one-on-one where somebody's told you you need to become a T-shaped marketer, whether it's in paid media or SEO or product marketing or event marketing or PR or corporate comms or whatever it is. You've probably been told, hey, you need to get really good at this, and that'll help you progress. And that's true to some degree. It is true because it helps you become specialized and actually be somebody that can create value inside of a particular business. But what happens is over time is getting really good at being a T-shaped marketer helps you contribute up until a certain point, after which you're not as valuable to the organization that you're operating in, because there are a bunch of other ways to create value that you're just not exposed to or don't get a chance to actually support the organization in that way. And so the counterfactual or the opposing way to kind of think about this is kind of how I define it, is to become a C-level marketer. So I don't want to just call it being a CMO, because there's only one seat to be a CMO inside of an organization. But to think like a C-level marketer is like a paradigm shift, where it's not about being the best at tactics, but it's really understanding the role that marketing plays at the heart of the organization and how it connects to every other function, how it connects to driving pipeline, how it connects to the investors that are involved, the market that you're serving, the products that you create. There's so many different layers to that that are not about the tactical knowledge that you would need to become a really good T-shaped marketer. And this brings me to this other drawing that actually really went viral as well, which is about the new CMO. And if you look at the different elements that are associated here, there's actually more that could be listed, but the new CMO, I would say historically, in 2004 to maybe let's say 2015, you could be a really great CMO if you were good at brand, you had event shops, maybe you could launch some Google ads, and that was pretty much it. That was good enough. And you would generate the MQLs, there would be a handoff to sales, you could wash your hands clean, and you were kind of done. What's changed since then is that the new CMO is actually a true business leader inside the organization. And most marketers haven't caught up to this or even understand what that even means. And so there's a lot of talk on places like LinkedIn and podcasts and everything about being revenue accountable, and you got to tie your work to revenue. And we've been beating this drum for 5 years, and a lot of other folks have as well. And that's true. But the new CMO also has to build the overall brand, has to think about pricing strategy, has to think about product management and what's on the roadmap and product market fit, and how do you actually make a dent with the business in a particular segment. You have to be an evangelist of customer experience. You have to collect customer feedback. You have to channel that back to your product teams or improve overall experiences. You have to be a strategic growth driver. You have to think about all the other initiatives that the business needs to move forward, like cross-sell and upsell. Do we need to think about potentially launching a new product and all these other strategic initiatives that can help move the organization forward? You have to be a financial steward. You have to really understand cash flow and financials and revenue growth targets and debt and other implications of that. And then finally, you have to be a corporate development officer, where you've seen M&A really ramp up in the last 10 years, and with the rise of private equity and everything else, where M&A is such a huge part of what the CMO needs to do to integrate teams and bring different organizations together and build a unified strategy across multiple different product lines. So as you start to look at all of these roles, there's a huge gap. I cannot tell you how many organizations we are brought into where the CMO or the marketing leader in place doesn't completely understand their mandate or what they're actually accountable for. They think that if they just do one or two of these things, let's say you are revenue accountable, that's not enough. You actually have to fully understand all these other areas to be a true leader for that organization. And so that brings me to this, which is that becoming a C-level marketer means learning an entirely different language. It's different skills. Your role is entirely different. You have to see the world in a very different way, and it requires a conscious effort to really get good at this skill. And so I'd say to simplify this, and we look at marketing like this with all of our clients as well, but I'd say there's five big mandates that a CMO really has. One is to understand the business context. Two is to understand the board and CEO's expectations. Three is to set the right strategy and focus areas. Four is to have the right resourcing in terms of team and budget. And finally, five is to communicate constantly throughout this process. And for each of these, I'm going to talk through mistakes and issues that companies encounter and people encounter in their role as a marketing leader, director, CMO, it could be a VP, it could even just be a specialist in terms of how you're seeing this and actually communicating. And I'd say out of all of these, number one, two, and five are probably the most important. Three and four are things that I've covered in the past in other webinars and things, but it's important to set the stage to include some of those things. So I touch on some of those topics, but really nailing down one, two, and five is going to be your key to success. So let's start with number one. So I think the number one mistake that I see leaders make is that they don't take enough time to understand the context of the business that they're operating in. And what I mean by this is that every business is different in terms of what its starting point is or where you're coming in. And if you don't come in and assess and analyze where that business is, you're far less likely to make the kind of impact that you need to make. And I'll give you just a personal story just from my side here. In 2016, I went to a conference when I was the CMO of Wild Apricot, conference called SaaStr. I'm sure a bunch of people here have been to that conference since then. In 2016, it was a super small event. There was like maybe 1,000 people there. And at that time, they were really pushing this predictable revenue book, which I'm sure a lot of people here have also read. And everybody was gung-ho about this BDR, SDR, AE model. Everybody was using that as a way to grow. And at Wild Apricot, we had never used this model. And so I left that conference, and one of the first things I did is I came back, I hired a sales leader, I hired 2 reps, and we started to put into motion the SDR AE playbook for the business. And I thought, this is it. Like, this is how we're going to grow from where we were to a $20 million business. Turns out it's completely wrong. 12 months later, fired the sales leader, disbanded the sales team, reassigned the reps to customer success, ditched our Salesforce implementation, and I almost got fired. I was very lucky. I had a CEO who was patient and helped me work through that time. But in a lot of cases, I know that I would have been fired inside that business. And I'm sure many of you have been through companies where in that same scenario where you've made a mistake like that, it has actually cost you your job. And so what really went wrong? Well, I'd say the number one mistake that I myself have made is that I did not understand the business context. The ACV of Wild Apricot was less than $2,000 a year. In that context, a sales team just doesn't work. And knowing that now seems like a no-brainer, like obviously that was never going to work as an idea. But at that time, it seemed like such a good idea, and the world has caught up and there's a lot more information out there that I probably wouldn't make that mistake in that same situation today. But back then it felt like a good idea, right? So understand in every business, wherever you are, if you get the context wrong, you are going to make mistakes that are going to cost the business and also cost you career progression and even potentially the job itself. And so bringing this a level higher to just strategy in general, there's a great paper by Michael Porter. It's called What is Strategy? It's taught in first year business schools everywhere. And what it was published in, like, I think 1995. And what he talks about is that strategy is not about operational effectiveness. Strategy is not about wanting to do something better. Like, everybody wants to be the best product, the cheapest product, the fastest product. Everybody wants to lower their CAC or improve their conversion rates. Everybody wants to do those things. So that's not a strategy. Strategy is actually involves trade-offs. It's about doing one thing better than somebody else and even differently. So different is the most important aspect of that, more than the better part. So being different can mean you actually have an approach to a market that is different from all your competitors, and that means giving up opportunities that might be available to them. As an example, at Wild Apricot, we went after the super small segment of small associations and nonprofits, even though there's tons of large nonprofits like the Cancer Society and Alzheimer's Association, players like that a lot of other competitors focused on. And that gave us a segment to actually go after that we were more uniquely fit for. To bring this to life a little bit differently, this is called an activity system. And this example is IKEA. And so the orange circles that you see are the pillars of that business, where the business involves self-serve selection, modular designs, there's limited customer service, there's low manufacturing cost. And if you've ever shopped at IKEA, you know you've been through that maze, you've gone through the warehouse, you've loaded everything into your car yourself, you've assembled the furniture yourself, and you can see that all the decisions that permeate from the orange circles all seem to make sense. It's self-transport, self-assembly, the pricing is lower, their inventory is on site. All these decisions work together like an activity system, right? That all are connected together. And so can you imagine if IKEA now started to sell super expensive furniture that was customized, and then you place an order and it arrives at your house, 16 weeks down the road because you built it to spec. That just would never happen inside IKEA. It may happen at a boutique furniture shop, but not inside IKEA. Another example is Southwest Airlines. In here, if you think about different airlines, there are some premium airlines, and then there's other airlines that are more budget airlines. And in this case, some of their pillars are low price, convenience, on time, limited customer service, but also friendly. And you can see how the decisions that come around from these pillars, for example, they only have a 737 fleet. They have fast gate turnaround times because if you spend too long or your flights are delayed, your costs increase, and then you have to charge a higher price to your customers. And so depending on the business, the core strategic pillars are going to be very different. And the first step to understanding the context of a business is to really understand what are those strategic pillars, and then how does that ultimately influence marketing decisions. Marketing is a subset of company strategy. So we must understand company strategy first. And this is one of the other drawings that I've made in the past that touches on this idea, is that people often think about functional strategy. Functional strategy might be SEO or paid media, and a ton of people write stuff about this. And yes, it makes sense that you need to rank on the first page of Google for certain keywords, or your technical SEO might be broken, or your product marketing on your certain web pages might be wrong. But none of that matters if it doesn't play off the subset of your company strategy. If you truly understand your company strategy, it might turn out that half the tactics that you're focused on are not relevant at all. And so step one inside your business is to get clarity on this company strategy piece. And the way you do that is by outlining the current state of the business. And here are some questions. Like, I do consulting calls with prospective clients and existing clients all the time. And I could say in about 15 minutes, I have a very clear idea of where the business is and what they need to do based on these kinds of questions. So number one, what is their revenue and EBITDA at the moment? Are they cash flow positive? Are they 5 million, 10 million, 100 million, 500 million? Depending on that, I already immediately understand what their reality kind of looks like. Number two, what's their funding type? Are they backed by private equity investors? Is it a VC round that they've raised recently, Series A, Series B? Or are they bootstrapped? Is it founder-led? Between those first two questions, I now have a mental model for what this business's day-to-day life looks like. So for example, if it is bootstrapped in 10 million, I know that that founder or founders are trying to manage cash flow for this business very strictly. They're growing at a responsible rate. Maybe they don't have as much visibility in terms of how to grow that business. And just their life looks very different than the CEO of a VC-backed firm that maybe has raised $100 million. Maybe they're doing 25 million or 50 million in revenue, but they're burning cash every single month. So now in this company's case, they need to grow faster to reach their targets. And at the same time, they need to plan for their next raise because they are burning their cash. Next, we get to ICP, TAM, and ACV. These three questions are very closely intertwined. On the ICP side, who are they going after? This is a very common question we all ask as marketers for any business. But then the secondary question is, how big is that market? Are you targeting the 600 biggest consumer packaged goods companies in the world, or are you targeting the 10 million small businesses in the legal or financial services space? That's very different markets to go after. And then understanding, what is that average customer worth to you, right? So as an example, there's a legal software company called Clio. They serve almost any kind of law firm, but most of their businesses are smaller in size because it's a self-serve platform that can kind of go on and use it. Conversely, there are enterprise level legal software companies that serve some of the largest legal firms in the world, and the size of their market is much smaller, but every customer is worth hundreds of thousands of dollars to them, right? So really understanding in this market, where does our business sit is super important. And I would say, even when you're interviewing for a job, I would try to ask all of these questions just to truly understand what are you walking into and what is the right strategy. Next, we on the ACV side, we want to connect it with LTV to truly understand, is this a healthy business in terms of product market fit? And churn is the quickest way to figure that out. So does the customer stay with them for a long period of time? Is the business mission critical inside every customer that they sell into? How long do they stay? What are is there net revenue retention above 100% where the customer actually expands over time? Or are they slowly churning the revenue that they land every single year? In some cases, you might find companies are really good at landing customers, but they suck at retaining them. And so they're actually just trying to replace customers every single year. And that's not a healthy business. Then you want to understand close rates and the funnel efficiency and sales cycles and all of those kinds of details to understand what is actually happening with their sales and marketing spend across the board and how much are certain activities contributing to pipeline and revenue. And then finally, you want to look at how much are they spending on marketing and sales and how big is the team. And that helps you understand the maturity of the business in terms of how much they're investing into their overall go-to-market. One slide that I've used in the past, and I've shared this on my LinkedIn as well, is looking at maturity as a function of how much pipeline contribution marketing is making. In a lot of cases, we find companies are sales led, pipeline contribution or revenue contribution from marketing is less than 10%, maybe less than 15%, but the company could be doing 50 to $100 million in revenue. And that's usually a good signal that there's a lot more maturity to be had here and to grow the business. So by identifying that up front, you now know what the journey needs to look like. A big mistake could be that the business, in terms of maturity, is a nascent marketing organization, but what you're trying to do is something that would only be applicable in a sophisticated marketing organization, right? So certain plays are better when you're more sophisticated than when you're earlier on because you don't even have the foundation laid. And so this model and this is in my new book, Exit Ready Marketing as the chapter structure, but really knowing, like, do we have TAM and segmentation in a good place? Is product marketing in a good place? Is sales enablement in a good place? Do we have the right strategy? Until this foundational layer is figured out, getting to demand gen content and customer marketing can be a fool's errand. You could be putting good money after bad and be incredibly inefficient. Once this is actually laid out, then getting the demand gen content, customer marketing, and then finally getting resourcing in place so that we eventually drive revenue growth. So that's the first section. The second thing I want to just talk about is that marketers don't spend enough time to understand the objectives of their CEO and board and really what are they trying to accomplish. You could be doing your job of driving pipeline and revenue and feel like you've done a good job, but if you don't understand this part, you can often miss the mark. And a good way to kind of think about this is in levels. So and levels and roles. So specialists and managers and directors, they often live in terms of tasks or people or tasks or initiatives or projects, excuse me. And so as you think about what am I actually focused on in my role, if that's where you're living, you're not going to have visibility into level 4 and level 5 areas, which are questions like how much budget do we need? What are our overall objectives? Are we on track to hit our targets? What do we need to do to validate our investment thesis and other things? And so the higher you move in terms of how you're looking at every initiative, the more you'll actually be able to help the company achieve its overall objectives. And the more likely you are to see the board as a CMO or a C-level marketer. And that's really the ultimate objective here. So if you're kind of just living in your shell or your ecosystem of tasks and projects, it might be that you're doing a great job there, but if the company's missing its overall objectives, it really doesn't matter if you've done a good job there. And you probably experienced this maybe with some of your team members or yourself, where you might be doing a good job in your particular domain, or they might be doing a good job in their domain, but then they ask for a raise, but the company's not doing well. And so it's kind of like this catch-22 where it's like, yeah, you're doing a good job, but we didn't grow to where we wanted to get to. So does it really matter? And you kind of get into this a bit of a tussle in trying to figure out what is the right answer there. So the higher you think, the more you can contribute to the overall objectives, and then the more likely you are to succeed in your role, even if you are a specialist or a manager and you're just responsible for a specific domain. And so the way we go about understanding the CEO and board is a list of questions. This is high level, but it gives you at least some idea. So thinking about the founder or the CEO, what are they driving towards? Are they looking for an exit? Do they want to raise another round? What type of pressures are they under? Number two, what are the projections and targets? What is the business hoping to achieve in the next 12 to 24 months? If it's a $3 million business, maybe it wants to be at 7 million in 24 months. And that's critical in order to raise the next round for that business. On the flip side, it could be that there's a $50 million business that the private equity firm eventually wants to exit in the next 3 years. In order to be able to exit it, that $50 million business actually needs to become a $60 million business. And so that kind of changes how you perceive the problem. Third is you want to look at finance assumptions. And I don't just mean projections here, but the very detailed, like good financial projections actually look at details of where's the revenue going to come from? Is it new customers? Is it cross-sell? Is it upsell? Are we launching a new product? Is there a new initiative like we're increasing our prices? Are we launching an in-product module that'll bring in more revenue from existing customers? Are we trying to expand seats within existing customers? Really understanding the detail of those assumptions help figure out where you should focus your energy. And that also connects to the strategic initiatives, things like pricing, new products, new like cross-sell opportunities, et cetera. All of these things connect to helping us understand where the opportunities are. And then finally, you want to look at the financials and the investment thesis and understand what is the financial pressure this business is under. So when the investors, for example, deploy capital in an asset, what was their rationale? They were hoping to combine this with another asset as an M&A platform? Were they looking to bolt on an asset to increase the enterprise value of the business? Were they hoping to ramp up the sales and marketing efforts from an organic perspective so that the business grows naturally into a particular revenue level? In all those cases, our understanding of what needs to be done changes quite a bit. And then finally, I'd say cash flow runway is super important. Like really knowing, people think about revenue and profit a lot, but people don't think about cash. But cash is the lifeblood of business, lifeblood of a business. Like you could be growing your top line revenue, you could be EBITDA, like your EBITDA could be positive, but cash flow wise, you might be burning cash. And the reason is that every month you're spending a ton on paid media in order to acquire those customers, and that's where a lot of the cash is being burned. So the better you understand that, the more you can manage your marketing budget in accordance with those objectives. And I see some questions coming in. Julie, I see your question. Let me get through this, and as we get to the end, I'll definitely answer your question as well. As you try to understand this, I'd say your CFO should be your best friend. The more aligned you are with your CFO, the better the job you're going to do at the board level or with your CEO. And the CFO needs you too, right? It's not just that you need the CFO. Their interests are just as much aligned. There are tons of CFOs that just kind of manage the books. They're almost like glorified controllers. That's not the type of CFO that I'm talking about. You actually want a CFO that is strategic, that understands the business objectives, knows how marketing, sales, product, all of these areas come together. And so you got to make sure you're building a relationship with that type of person and helping your CFO level up to that level so that they can actually contribute and be a voice at the table that is more than just here were our profitability numbers for the last quarter, because anybody can kind of pull that report from QuickBooks. And then finally, I'd say becoming financially savvy is super important. I cannot tell you how many marketers I've met that don't completely understand the 3 basic financial statements. And knowing that and bringing that to the table at an executive level or the board level will help you achieve just so much success. Knowing things like gross margin, knowing the rule of 40, knowing how cash is moving through the business, knowing your revenue projections, knowing how working capital works inside of a business. As the more you know about that stuff, the more you're going to start to connect the dots on how all of that eventually affects your marketing decisions. And I see marketers frustrated often where they want more budget, but the way you're going to get more budget is if you understand this stuff, because this is your CEO's reality, right? So in a dynamic where you don't understand this reality, you're going to bring requests to the table. They're going to evaluate it from this lens, and they will say yes or no to you. And to you, it might feel like a black box as to why is marketing not getting more budget? But the more you understand this stuff, you can actually speak to your CEO as an equal and use rationale that can be backed up at a financial level to get more support. The third biggest mistake I see marketing leaders make is that they set the wrong strategy or work on random activities. And I'm going to zoom through this section because some of you have seen this stuff before. It's just depending on the business model, different channels work and don't work. So if you're low ACV, high TAM business, you got to be more inbound driven. If you're high ACV, limited TAM business, you got to be more ABM and sales driven. And different channels and activities are relevant in different situations. So paid media and SEO is super important if, let's say, you're less than 10K, and ABM is super important if, let's say, your average deal size is 300K plus. So this matrix is a good way to kind of think about that. The one note I'll make is just making sure your budget requests are tied to strategic initiatives. And so that's some of the conversations that we had earlier. So really knowing what are those initiatives and then tying your budget asks to making sure that those initiatives are successful will go way farther than you saying we need to launch a new website or we have this initiative we want to do and I need more tactical help or more hands on deck. More hands on deck. Everybody wants more hands on deck, right? So when you really want to connect that to as many of the revenue targets and strategic initiatives that we can think of. And then finally, you want to allocate your budget in accordance with those strategic initiatives and forecasts as well. The fourth biggest mistake I see is marketers don't ask for the right team or budget to hit the target. So as we set the right strategy, it's going to become clear that there are gaps inside your marketing organization. There might be that, and everything in pink here, let's assume that those are roles that are not existent in this team. That becomes a hiring roadmap for this organization to actually bring those people inside the organization. And so if your marketing organization just looks like the green boxes, that's a pretty light team to do all the things we would want to do. And so it's on you to make the right business cases to say, here are all the opportunities where we can invest. If we want to get to the revenue targets that we've outlined, these are the people I need in order to be able to get there. And then that translates into a hiring roadmap that you can then build business cases around and actually defend and get more budget for. And then finally, you want to ask for the right budget, right? So based on the bookings targets, working backwards from your conversion rates or looking at your acceptable cost per MQL or how many MQLs you actually need, you can kind of forecast how much budget you need. So in this company's case, they need 2.6 million in 23. Their actual budget in 22 was 2.3. So that becomes an additional 300,000. And you want to finally divide that by the right different channels and campaigns that you can be investing in so that you know what you're scaling up and scaling down. And I sped through that because I want to focus on this one, which is that the fifth biggest mistake I see leaders make is they do not communicate enough or in the right way to earn trust from the board. And I'll tell you a story from a client that I had a few months ago, and I was talking to their CMO, and he just didn't understand this concept that a big part of his role is to earn trust. He might be doing good things on a day-to-day basis, but if he does not communicate that well, nobody's going to understand what he's working on, and he's not going to have the political capital to do the things he wants to do, and then he's not going to get the budget that he needs to do the things that he wants to do. So the communication piece is probably the most important, and the idea is that CMOs need to lead their team, so that's a critical part. You need to educate the market or talk to the market. That almost every marketing person understands those two things. What marketers don't understand is these two things, is that one, you need to educate internally. And that means like just your colleagues in product or finance or customer success, just to get them to understand what is marketing working on and how can you align yourselves better with your counterparts and leaders in other parts of the organization. And then this one, managing up, is like the most important, is communicating with the CEO, communicating with the board, having the right story, having the right data, and bringing all of that information to folks so that they can make the right decisions and feel like you're on the same side of the table and it's not adversarial. I'm sure people on this call have been inside board meetings where it kind of feels adversarial, where you present something and you're challenged and people are asking you for things and you feel like you're doing a good job, but you're kind of being poked for more information. And I'll say that in those situations, that's the gap, is there's not enough data or insight being brought so that the people that you're reporting into feel comfortable or they can trust that the matter's in the right person's hands. And so how do we do this? I'd say the communicating up piece is making sure the strategy and the focus areas are constantly communicated upwards. Like, here's what we're focused on. We see ABM being the biggest lever for this organization. Here are the 30 accounts. Here's how much revenue sits inside those accounts. We're starting with these 5, and here are the campaigns that we're launching in the next month. Like something just as simple as that, as a 5-slide deck would quell so many concerns at a board level. And I see marketers that all the time not putting things like that together. 2 is budgeting and forecasting. connecting that strategy and focus areas to the marketing budget you need, and forecasting out how much revenue impact you will make. Third is the team structure and people that we just talked about. Fourth is performance and adjustment. So once you've done these first three things, and I see somebody raise their hand, Ness, I will definitely call on you as we get through this. Once you have established the strategy and the forecast, you need to constantly communicate forecast versus actuals. Here's what we forecasted for January: MQLs, SQLs, pipeline, close one deals. We did it by channel as well. And here's what we can see in terms of our actuals. We are getting more from organic or SEO. We're getting less from paid social on LinkedIn. Our events did really well this month, so we have a spike. Our ABM campaigns have not launched, so we missed the forecast on that. And here's kind of how it reads. This type of a report will save you months of headache and facing this uphill battle with your board. And then finally, I'd say is roadblock blocks and challenges, anything that's in the way of you doing 1 to 4 correctly, and bringing that back to the table and saying, look, I want to do X. I'm having a problem with my agency, or I'm having a problem with a particular team member. I think we may need to fix that, or I'm having a problem with the sales leader. And be very candid here, as you're a business partner. So the more candid you are, it's not about finger pointing. It's just about bringing the problem on putting the problem on the table, sitting on the same side and saying, what is the best way we should solve this? And you have to move quickly through removing roadblocks and getting allies. Your CEO can be an ally there to help you remove roadblocks, as an example. Next, you want to constantly query for more information. So yes, you're communicating up, but there's going to be things that change quarter by quarter. As a very basic example, interest rates have changed drastically in the last 18 months. The financial reality of each of your businesses has changed as well. Without even knowing anything about your businesses, I can tell you that the debt service, or the amount that your company is paying into debt service, has skyrocketed. There's way more being paid to interest. There's way less cash available. Maybe your founder or your CEO or your investors are looking at a new debt facility. Maybe they're looking at a secondary investment. There's all kinds of things that have changed. So you need to query your CFO, your CEO, your board for information as often as possible. That could be additional budget plans or forecasts. That could be just inside meetings. That could be at a lunch, just to understand what has changed in terms of the business context, in terms of the modeled assumptions, in terms of the financial priorities for the business. Maybe even some strategic initiatives have been shelved because there's not enough cash to go around. So maybe we're not going to invest in that new product that we're planning on launching. And ultimately, you want to get to an alignment on expectations, or updated expectations. And people complain about things changing all the time. Well, that's because things do change all the time. So the more you understand that, then you bring all of that back and you educate your team. Hey, here was our priority before. Here's what it is now. Here's why. Here's the data. Here's what's changed. And then you can get back to the same level of executional discipline that you want to be at. And then finally, you want to constantly give your CEO and board an update. And I would say this is probably the best template for a board presentation that I can give you. It's going to probably, like, what was this, 8 slides, 9 slides, where overall performance, what is pipeline, bookings, revenue, your CAC, your close rates, et cetera. Look at overall funnel metrics, leads, MQLs, ops, channel performance, which channels are doing well, which channels are not, campaign performance. Maybe some campaigns are doing better than others. Maybe there's things that you need to shut off. Performance versus plan. What's on track? What's off track? What's working? What's not working? Any adjustments that you're making? What's being changed? What are you reallocating? What are you shutting down? What are you scaling up? How have you updated your priorities? What's your focus for the next 3 to 6 months? What's going to help you achieve those objectives that have been set? People and org changes, excuse me. How is the team changing? What changes need to be made overall to the org so that you can continue to deliver? And then finally, what's an updated forecast, or what should they expect from you in terms of marketing performance going forward? If you just follow this for every board meeting, I guarantee you will knock it out of the park. And I would say, take out the fluff. The details don't matter. You don't need to talk about that very specific thing that you changed in Google Analytics to track something better, or that very specific blog post that did really well. None of those things matter. You just report like this and you articulate the truth. The job of the leader is to articulate the truth with the most unbiased perspective as possible. That's how you earn trust. And so the more of this you do over time, you will build a ton of political capital and you'll be able to do a lot more inside the business, and you'll see your career grow as well. So in short, and this is the summary, is bring strategic clarity to the marketing discipline and communicate that well, and you'll see your career skyrocket. And so with that said, I'll stop here. Just a couple of notes we're saying, I'm going to get to questions right after this, is if you haven't bought my new book, it came out this week. It's already been an Amazon bestseller. Would appreciate the support, and please go buy the book. It'll definitely help you in your respective roles as well. So with that said, please put in questions.